You're the author of The General Son. And I made it, many people, they would love to meet one of the founding fathers, someone who's connected to them. Your grandfather was one of the founding fathers of the state of Israel.
Yes, he was.
Tell us about this.
Yes, he was. The generation of my grandparents was the generation of the first Jews to take on Zionism as an ideology and take on this idea of establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And he was very active. He became a leader within the movement. He was a member of the de facto Jewish government before the State of Israel was established. And he was one of the signers on the Declaration of Independence when the State of Israel was established.
So that would be that you can make a contrast, like, let's say he was like the Abraham Lincoln or the, no, I'm sorry, George Washington. I'm sorry about that. Like a George Washington. Yes. Okay. And then from there, your father actually, he was the general.
My father was, both my parents were born in Palestine, so they were the first generation Israelis, if you will, first generation Jews who were born there. And my father, as a young man, while still in high school, joined the Zionist militia, became an officer. So in the war of 1948, when the Zionists occupied most of Palestine, he was an officer already. And then he remained in
mine. He's a good friend of mine. Hopefully he'll watch the show. And we've gotten into, this talk a few times. And usually, because this is a human thing. When you see children who are just being killed, right, and indiscriminately, and then people will make arguments like, "Look, we're the ones being terrorized. That we have to defend ourselves, right? This land, we came there, and now they're trying to force us into the ocean." So, what do you say when you hear things like this?
Well, it's a complete distortion of the history and a complete distortion of reality. The only reason there's a Palestinian resistance is because the Palestinians were thrown out of their land, Palestine was occupied, and Palestinians live under a brutal regime, which is very similar to the apartheid regime that used to exist in South Africa. Therefore, there is resistance. If that didn't exist, if there was no occupation of Palestine, if Israel did not violently kill and oppress Palestinians, there would be no Palestinian resistance. So you can't blame the victim for resisting. You have to look at what started the conflict. You have to look at the oppressor. You have to look at the stronger power, and the responsibility lies in their hand.
I just had a rabbi give me an analogy. He said, "Look, imagine you left your home, and then someone came and occupied it, and then you try to get it back, and then they went to the judge." Have you heard some of these analogies? Maybe you can.
Yeah, that's assuming that that's taking it to a place which I don't usually go. That's making the assumption that today's Jews are really the descendants of the ancient Hebrews that used to live in that part of the world some 3,000 years ago. That's a bit of a stretch for me. And even if it was true, I don't think it. I agree with him. It doesn't justify. I did not live there 3,000 years ago. My grandparents immigrated from Ukraine. Their parents, their grandparents didn't live there. And I don't know any Jew that can trace his or her ancestors back to the ancient Hebrews. So that's a lot of myth there, and I don't think it's relevant. The point is,
wow, he kept it 100. It's an actual Israeli Jew that kept it 100.
Colonialist movement. It was brutally oppressive, and
all right, so there you have it, right from the horse's mouth. Actual grandson of one of the founding fathers of 1948 takeover of Palestine, Israeli Jewish, admitting that their ancestors are not the Hebrews of the Bible.